Hi, we're Group 10. We're gonna present environmental site assessment. The intent of environmental site assessment, the prerequisite is applied to schools and healthcare. The intent would be to protect the health of vulnerable populations by ensuring that the site is assessed for environmental contamination and that any environmental contamination has been remediated. So this assessment requires that the site receives a Phase 1 environmental site assessment to determine whether environmental contamination exists at the site as described in ASTM, stands for American Society for Testing and Materials. If contamination is suspected, a Phase 2 environmental site assessment must be conducted. If the Phase 2 environmental site assessment indicates soil or groundwater contamination, site remediation must occur. A site assessment will teach the project team about the site's challenges and features so that they can thoughtfully plan the location of the building to enhance its features and to mitigate issues found during environmental assessments and those due to human impact. During the site assessment, a project team will consider opportunity to open space, protection of native habitats and species, climate and rainfall, site contamination and remediation needs, and whether the site has been previously developed and disturbed, among other things. So behind this intent, many sites may contain contamination that could harm the health and well-being of future occupants. For example, soil or groundwater may have been polluted by previous uses, or existing structures might contain hazardous materials such as lead. Children who are more sensitive to toxic substances than adults are can be afflicted with learning disabilities, chronic and acute respiratory diseases, cancer, or other illnesses after exposure to toxins. People using healthcare facilities have greater sensitivity to environmental stressors during their illnesses and treatments. This prerequisite promotes the protection of human health by requiring the ESA, as known as environmental site assessment, and remediation of any confirmed site contamination. Project teams may use local assessment standards if they are at least as stringent as ASTM Phase 1 and Phase 2 ESAs. So for steps for this assessment, we have Step 1, determine whether Phase 1 ESA is required. Step 2, conduct Phase 1 ESA. Step 3, determine whether Phase 2 assessment is required. Step 4, conduct Phase 2 assessment. Step 5, determine whether remediation is required. And Step 6, remediate site.
So the Phase 1 ESA we have mentioned in the previous slide is a non-intrusive assessment to evaluate the likelihood of contamination on the site. The investigation will include the contamination in soil, groundwater, surface water, and building material. The Phase 1 includes a review of historical records, a site visit to identify potential contamination sources and signs, and the interviews with individuals who are familiar with the history of the site. A report for Phase 1 assessment should indicate whether Phase 2 is required. The validation for Phase 1 ESA is 180 days. The update is required if the site's Phase 1 assessment is more than 180 days but less than 1 year. If it is more than 1 year, a new assessment is required. If the report in Phase 1 indicates that a recognized environmental condition exists on the site or recommends additional assessment activities, then a Phase 2 is required. Sample testing will be conducted in Phase 2 to determine how much contamination exists. If the contamination levels in Phase 2 are indicated that exceed the regulatory criteria, the site may need the remediation. Therefore, projects with known contamination sometimes will wish to directly move to Phase 3. The Phase 3 assessment includes more extensive sample testing than the Phase 2, and the report will further include an evaluation of remediation option, cost, and logistic. The site after remediation must meet the standard of unrestricted residential use.
So this shows the required documentations for no contamination with Phase 1 or no contamination with Phase 2 and contamination with Phase 2 or 3. So they have like Phase 1 or local equivalent assessment, Phase 2 or 3 or local equivalent assessment, and description of contamination and remediation, and verification that site has been remediated to residential use standards. So these are related information for reference. Related credit tips, for example, an LT credit high priority site. If the site is classified as a brownfield and remediation is completed to the satisfaction of the authority having jurisdiction, the project is eligible to achieve the related credit. And the lead is changed from 2009. The blanket exclusion of formal landfill sites has been removed. Local equivalent assessments are available to all project teams as an alternative to Phase 1 and 2 ESAs. Projects are no longer allowed to achieve the prerequisite based on an asbestos sampling plan and remediation report. Thanks for watching, and if you have any question, email us. Hope it helped preparation for your exam.